G'day and welcome back to the channel, and time for an update on the situation regarding the investigations against me by CAA. Well, when I say against me, a person or persons unknown have laid some complaints about my flying, deeming that it was potentially a breach of the rules and regulations designed to keep drone and model flying safe. Okay, so CAA contacted me a week or so ago and said, "Oh, we've had these complaints, and we're going to send you an email with some questions if you wouldn't mind answering the questions, because we need to investigate. We've got an obligation to investigate any complaints that are put before us." Although I noticed my complaint about the drone in the national park in New Zealand, which was knocked out of the sky by trampers throwing stones and comprehensively documented in the media, I've heard nothing about that complaint. Yet they're investigating complaints against me that are made subsequent to my complaint. So I would ask, why are you not finishing the complaints before you start investigating new ones? I've heard nothing, so I don't know. I'm not going to draw conclusions. Is there something going on? We don't know. I don't really care. I mean, CAA is CAA. They'll do what they want to do. They have a legal obligation and legal privilege to investigate all sorts of things. So, as I say, I got this email from a guy called Christopher, who, nice, polite, introduced himself. It's the second communication I've had from CAA. Early on in the lockdown, I got communication from a young lady who said, "We've had some complaints about your flying." I did a video on that. I'll link to that in the description. "We've had complaints about your flying, but we don't really have a problem with it. We just want to make sure that you're not going to be encouraging other people to break the rules." And so I did a safety video. Telling people, don't, break the rules in lockdown. Here are what you should be doing, and this is why. I explained it. And I think that went a long way to ensuring that people knew where they stood, because CAA's own directives on this were rather poor. They actually misinterpreted the rules themselves, misinterpreted the directives of another organisation, the Ministry of Transport. So they had all sorts of conflicting advice going out there. I tried to smooth the waters and tell people in a relatable way what they could do and what they couldn't do. I'm working for safety. I'm the safety guy. So it's a little bit annoying that I'm the guy being investigated for not unsafe flying. No one has mentioned safety in this whole thing. No one has mentioned safety. It's all about rules, the letter of the rules, and that annoys me a little bit because, as I think everyone watching this video will know, rules do not guarantee safety. And to make that point, just last weekend, there was a tragedy less than 100 kilometres from here. Two glider pilots, or two people in a glider, killed when their glider crashed into a mountain. Now, rules didn't protect those people. I'm sure they were following all the rules, but sometimes stuff happens. And so rules cannot guarantee safety. Safety is a lot more than following rules. And so it's about an attitude, it's about knowledge, it's about understanding, it's about making sensible decisions, many of which can only be made on the spot by the people who are fully aware of what's going on. You've got to look at a risk, you've got to mitigate it or manage it, and handle it in a way that doesn't produce injury or damage to property. And that's something you can't do from a desk high in an ivory tower through a rule book. That's the sort of thing that can only be done by Johnny on the spot. And so I try and teach people and relate to them that you are responsible for safety, not CAA, not the FAA, not any other regulatory organisation. Ultimately, you, the guy behind the sticks, you're the guy responsible for safety, and everything you do should be subject to the test. Will this endanger people? Will this endanger people's property? And if it doesn't pass that test, don't do it. Doesn't matter what the rules say, don't do it. That's my safety message. That's what I say repeatedly. So as I say, I'm very annoyed at some level that I'm being investigated. But as you'll see in the letter that Chris wrote me, it seems CAA have a legal obligation to investigate at least some of the complaints. Not the ones I lay, but the ones that people lay against me, apparently. Hey ho. So let's read what Chris wrote me, and then I'll tell you what I think, and I'll go through what I have said in reply to Chris's email. Okay, here's Chris's email. He says, "Good afternoon, Bruce. I hope you're well." Did he know that I wasn't well? Nice of him to ask. Affable chap. Sounded very nice on the phone too. Anyway, he goes on to say, "As discussed with you on the 27th of May 2020, the CAA received some complaints about some drone flights you allegedly undertook and posted to your YouTube channel XJet, which may have been in breach of some Part 101 civil aviation rules." Now, the key word in this entire sentence is allegedly. It has been alleged that I conducted these drone flights. There's no evidence, there's no proof. We've got videos, but as you'll see later on, videos are not proof. Anyway, it goes on to say, "As the regulator for civil aviation, we are obliged to investigate any complaints to establish if any rules have been breached. Apparently not my complaints though, because mine have gone unanswered. Therefore, I would like to ask you some questions about these flights. He then says, which is very important, you are not obliged to answer the questions, but your cooperation would be appreciated. So basically, in a nutshell, there have been allegations, we have no proof, would you like to incriminate yourself? That's honestly, that's what this whole thing boils down to. So let's look at the questions, let's look at the flights involved, look at the questions that are being asked. Now this first one is drone flight published on XJet 15th of March 2020 showing drone launched near a lake reserve and drone crashing into mud. I think we remember that. That was an interesting flight. I think it was a very safe flight because I flew in the middle of a deserted lake bed, quite away from other people's property, quite away from other people, and at an altitude that was well below the 400-foot minimum, or 400-foot maximum and for model flying, and the 500-foot minimum for GA operations. It was reasonably close to the local helipad, however, and that's an issue that Christopher raises. Anyway, he says, were you the drone operator during this flight? And did you publish the video? Well, yeah, were you? So obviously they don't know, they can't prove, there's been an allegation, they want me to say, yes, it was me, I put my hand up. I'm not going to say that because it's not my job to incriminate myself if there was a problem. And then, if so, can you tell me the date of the flight, the location, launch, make, model of drone? Make and model of drone is totally irrelevant. No relevance whatsoever. It doesn't matter what I'm flying because in New Zealand here, our rules apply to, well, our RPAS rules, our drone rules apply to everything from 0 grams to 14.999 kilograms, regardless. It doesn't matter whether I'm flying a tiny little Mobula 6 or a massive, great commercial drone weighing 14 kilograms, the same rules apply. So the make and model of the drone is not relevant to any thing to do with the regulations. There's no rule that says you may not fly this type of drone or you may not fly that model of drone, so that is irrelevant. I'm going to ignore that. It has no bearing on whether or not the rules were broken. Now the second question, assuming you were the operator, because there is no proof, there's only allegations, and video is not proof. Were you wearing first-person view goggles during the flight? Now, this is interesting because it points to what they really want to know. They're asking me these questions, but the questions they want to know is, did you break any rules? So from the questions being asked, I have actually drawn up a list of the regulations that obviously they're fishing to see whether I broke. And the FPV goggles one is a part 101.209, which I'll refer to later. That's the regulation that's trying to find out if I broke. Question 3, was the flight conducted within 4 kilometres of the Tokoroa Hospital heliport and the Tokoroa airfield? If so, can you tell me the approximate distance your flight was from the helipad and the airfield? Well, again, that is probably if they want to know whether I broke the regulations, and this would be part 101.205, which is flying near aerodromes, as they call them, or listed airfields. That's why they're asking these questions. They want to know, want to work out if I broke subsection 205, and we'll get onto that later. Then also, if the flight was within 4 kilometres of the heliport and the airfield, so they don't know, they can't tell from the video obviously if it was it undertaken in accordance with an agreement from the heliport and airfield operators? Because under the part 205, you must have an arrangement, an agreement with the operators of airfields if you're flying within 4 kilometres of them. Also says, if not, can you tell me if you have any sort of exemption arrangement with the operators permitting you to fly a drone within the 4 kilometre range without having to advise them or seek permission? And if so, can you provide any documentary evidence of these agreements? Again, this is just checking to see if I'm complying with subsection 205. Then we have, did you have an observer in attendance while the drone was active in flight? If not, can you tell me why not? And again, this is to check compliance with section 209, which is about line of sight and the use of spotters and so forth with FPV operations. Then he says, do you have a current pilot wings qualification certificate or instructor certificate issued by Model Flying New Zealand? Because to fly within 4 kilometres of an airfield under section 205, you must have a wings certificate or an instructor certificate. Now this was a little concerning because I know that Christopher has already been in contact with Model Flying New Zealand, and he has verified that I am a member of good standing and that I do have the necessary qualifications. So why is he asking me here? Remember, he found that out last week. I didn't get this email until yesterday. So a bit disingenuous. It does make me prick up a little bit and say, what are you trying to trick me into? Why can't you just say we know? Why are you asking a question to which you already have the answer? It's not very good. It doesn't instill confidence that this is a totally objective and straightforward process, this investigation. And then question 7, are you able to provide me with any flight tracking data from this flight? Well, again, this is worrying because it shows that CAA seem to think that every drone has GPS, it has data logging, it's a DJI, which gives you a complete flight record on your DJI Go app and all that sort of stuff. No, no, my drones, I don't fly drones. I fly multirotors. Not one of my multirotors has a GPS in it. Not one of my multirotors has any autonomous flight capability. It is a radio-controlled model. If I don't fly it, it falls out of the sky into the mud or the bushes or whatever is underneath. And since I never fly over people, it's always safe. So yeah, CAA, you need to understand that not all drones, or not all multirotors are drones, and not all multirotors have all this complicated high-techery on them. And then this is the killer question. Would you like us to fine you or take you to court? Because that's what this says when they say, do you believe you may have breached any part of 101 rules while conducting this flight? Why would anyone in their right mind say, oh yeah, I was breaking the rules, no worries, send me a bill? No, I'm sorry, but it's a little bit of an insult to the intelligence, this one, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of like that form when you go into America through immigration, and it says, are you or have you ever been a member of a terrorist group? Really? Seriously? Terrorists are that stupid? Yeah, so this one, we'll just ignore that because that is stupid. I mean, you're saying, Mr. Simpson, we think you're so stupid, we're going to, have you fess up for all your crimes if you've had any. So, sorry, not interested. Right, let's move on to the second flight, which is the one published on April 19th, 2020, showing a drone flying in thick fog. And I'm sure we'll all remember that one as well. It was it was a little, the GEP Cine Queen 4K sub 250 gram drone flying in thick fog. Now, what they're getting at here is they want to know under section 209 whether I flew in such a way that the model wasn't always visible. Did I lose line of sight? Was line of sight lost with the model? Because that's a breach of the regulations. And here we go. Once again, they don't know who was flying it. They can't prove it because they ask, were you the drone operator? So they have no proof that I was, and they want me to incriminate myself. Hey, ho, whatever. And confirm the make and model again. It's irrelevant. There is no relevance to that. Unless the drone weighed more than 15 kilos, then it's covered by the rules that cover all the other drones. So, sorry, stop wasting my time. Then, assuming you were an operator, were you wearing first-person view goggles during the flight? I'll address that later. Was the flight conducted within 4 kilometres of the heliport or airfield? Tell me the approximate distance. Again, this is speaking to part 205, where you've got to have all those permissions and the necessary certification to fly in those locations. Which is, again, so what I'm doing is working out which regulations they think or are alleging may have been breached. And then, were you out of sight of the drone at any stage during the flight? If so, did you have an observer in attendance? And at what height would you have flown the drone? Well, as I say, with this particular drone, as we'll see, it must have always been within line of sight. And at what height would you have flown this drone? Below 400 feet, I think would be the answer, wouldn't it? In fact, well below 400 feet. Of course, there's no way of knowing that because this drone doesn't have GPS. So there's no way of getting any information back as regards to altitude. But I've been flying drones, been flying FPV for, what is it now, about 15 years? So I know how high I'm flying. Okay, then during the flight, did you fly over residential properties or people? If so, did you obtain their consent? Now this speaks to section 207, where you must not fly over people or property without prior consent. And I'll cover that in my response. And then we go, are you willing to provide me with any flight tracking data from this flight? Again, not all multirotors are DJI drones. The CAA, you're out of touch with what the world really is. You have a very myopic view of these craft, and you need to update that because you're supposed to be making rules that are relevant and pertinent. Finally, question 7, do you believe would you like to be fined or prosecuted? There we go, there's that question again. Fine, now let's move on to the third complaint, which is 5th of March, showing drone chasing magpies. Now, I don't think it's illegal to chase magpies. I haven't seen anything in the regulations that say you may not chase magpies. Magpies are an introduced species, they're a pest species. They're actually eradicated in many areas because they damage the native bird life. And at an airfield, no birds are good birds. You don't want birds at an airfield. Anyway, so the questions were you the drone operator during the flight? So obviously you can't prove anything from the video. You want me to put my hand up and say, oh, I admit it was me. I'm not going to do that. Then you say, if so, can you tell me the date of the flight location, make and model of the drone? Again, totally irrelevant, make and model of the drone, not relevant in the least. Then, assuming you were the drone operator, because again, no proof, did you have permission from the airport operator to fly your drone over the airport for the purpose of scaring the birds? Well, now, you see, there is a general, well, I'll cover this further in my response, but there's general permission to fly model aircraft at the Tokoroa airfield. And you don't need a purpose. You could be scaring birds, you could be just enjoying the view, you could be racing, you could be doing aerobatics. The purpose of scaring the birds, that's completely irrelevant. There's no bearing on whether any regulation has been broken. So I'm sorry, these questions are not good questions. Then when you flew your drone at the airport, hang on a minute, assuming you were the drone operator, versus when you flew your drone. Now suddenly the assumption is that I did fly the drone. How does this work? Either you're assuming it or you're telling me I did. I'm sorry, this is really poor. This is very, very poor. I don't get a warm fuzzy feeling with these questions. Now, if it was simply a case of we have to investigate because we made a complaint, I could understand the questions would be relevant. They would be focused on ascertaining the basic facts. Here we are flopping backwards and forwards. We're asking information that isn't in the least bit relevant, and we're also asking questions to which we already have the answer. This doesn't pass the sniff test to me. I'm sorry, maybe I'm misjudging Christopher, but it just doesn't pass the sniff test. I'm sorry, but hey ho, we'll just continue on. Then it says, would you like to be fined or prosecuted? Again, so there we go. That's the email I got. Okay, so. From that, you can see that I'm not 100% sure that this is a investigation being undertaken with full objectivity. I think there may be some, I don't know, there's some old grudges left from when I had my problems with CAA. I don't know. And here's the final bit. This email and its accompanying attachments is intended for the named recipient only and may contain information that is confidential and subject to legal privilege. Well, I'm sorry. You sent it to me. I didn't agree not to publish it, so it's getting published. That's it. You cannot unilaterally impose that on me. If you did not want this published, you shouldn't have sent it to me. So there you go. Everyone gets to see what you've sent to me, because I think it's very important that people are aware of how the investigation process works and that it's open and transparent. And that the only way to do that is to present the emails you sent to me for everyone to see. And now let's take a look at what I've said to Christopher. Okay, here's my response. Hi, Christopher, in response to your email. Now, as I said, what we're looking at here are which rules it is alleged that I've broken. And I'm just going to go through them here. I've got the relevant regulation. Let me just minimize this window. And yes, I use Linux. Woohoo, how about that? So here are the rules that it is being alleged I may have breached. And this is 101.205, aerodromes. Let's just run through it. A person may not operate a remotely piloted aircraft or free flight model within 4 kilometers of an uncontrolled aerodrome, which is the aerodromes we're talking about, unless the operation is undertaken in accordance with an agreement with the aerodrome operator, and in the case of a free flight aircraft, the aircraft is launched downwind of an active runway, and in the case of a remotely piloted aircraft, each pilot has an observer in attendance while the aircraft is in flight, and the aircraft is not operated at a height of more than 400 feet above ground level unless the operator has been approved by the director to operate the aircraft above that thing. Also, you may not operate within 4 kilometers of a controlled aerodrome. Doesn't account. These aren't controlled aerodromes that we're near, or any aerodrome unless the person is the holder of or under the direct supervision of the holder of a pilot qualification issued by an approved organisation such as Model Flying New Zealand and the Wings, or is under the supervision of such a person, or is the holder of a pilot's license. Apparently, and this is quite amazing, apparently if you can fly a manned aircraft, you can fly a full-size aircraft, then you're good enough to fly a model near an airport. So what this says is, if you're a pilot, if you've got your pilot's license or your microlight license or whatever, you can then go to the local airfield and fly a 200 mile an hour jet aircraft, because apparently you're good enough, even if you've never flown a model before. That's how little the CAA understands the hobby. And then it also says other stuff here, which is, that's not really relevant. And notice that this does not apply. None of this thing regarding proximity to airports applies to a shielded operation that is conducted outside the boundary of an aerodrome, and airspace that is physically separated from the aerodrome by a barrier that is capable of arresting the flight of the aircraft. So that's the shielded operation. If you're flying below the height of the tallest tree or object within 100 meters, it's considered to be a shielded operation. So you don't need permissions, you don't need the certifications and so forth. So that's the first rule that it's obviously clearly they're concerned that I may have broken. Now the next rule is airspace, 207. And this says a person operating a remotely piloted aircraft must, unless operating in a danger area, avoid operating in airspace above persons who have not given their consent for the aircraft to operate in that airspace. And you notice I never fly over people in public places. I never fly over people in public places. And only if I ever fly over people, it's people who have agreed to that happening. And then you may not fly above property unless prior consent has been obtained from any persons occupying that property or the property owner. And you must maintain observation of the surrounding airspace in which the aircraft is operating for other aircraft. And you must not operate the aircraft at any height above 400 feet. Okay, so that's the airspace thing. What else have we got? There's nothing in A requires you under the warranty, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so these things aren't so, yeah, not that important here. Yep, so that's the airspace rule. And then finally, there is the visual line of sight operation, which as it applies to FPV and flying in fog. And this rule applies to remotely piloted aircraft and free flight model aircraft. A person must not operate an aircraft to which this rule applies in any area where the person's view of the surrounding airspace in which the model aircraft will operate is obstructed, or in meteorological conditions that obstruct the person's ability to maintain visual line of sight of the aircraft. This is interesting because in free flight model aircraft, I've lost quite a few free flight models to thermals. They just disappear. So if you put a free flight model up and it disappears in a thermal, you've broken this rule, because you are going to lose sight of the model, therefore you won't know where the surrounding airspace is. You'll be in breach of the rule because your tiny little free flight model hooked a thermal. Be aware of that. And then it says, a person who operates an aircraft to which this rule applies must at all times maintain visual line of sight with the aircraft. So again, as soon as that free flight model gets too small to see, you've broken the rules. And must be able to see the surrounding airspace in which the aircraft is operating, and must operate the aircraft below the cloud base. Well, that stands to reason, because if you go above the clouds, then you can't be seen from the ground, and therefore you're no longer in visual line of sight. And for this purposes, visual line of sight means a straight line along which the observer has a clear view, and which may be achieved with the use of spectacles, contact lenses, any device to correct normal vision, but you may not use electronic, mechanical, electromagnetic, optical, or electro-optical instruments. And in the case of a first-person view system, and you must have a trained observer who maintains visual line of sight of the aircraft, sight of the surrounding airspace in which the aircraft is operating, and direct communication with the person who's operating the aircraft. So, yeah, there you go. Those are the rules that allegedly I may have broken if it was me flying those drones in those flights. So let's go back to the letter, bring that back up. Let's go back to the letter and look at what I said in response to Christopher. Now, issue number one was CAA 101.205, which is the aerodromes rule. Was that breached? Let's have a look at that. I've said, as you are already aware, I'm a member of Model Flying New Zealand and a holder of the wings certification recognised by CAA as required under the rules to allow the operation of an RPAS within 4 kilometres of a listed helipad or airfield. I find it odd and somewhat concerning that you would ask a question to which you already have the answer, given that you've already verified my membership and wings status with Model Flying New Zealand last week. I want Christopher to know that I don't consider that to be an acceptable strategy, asking questions to which you already have the answer. It's a waste of his time, it's a waste of my time, and it's somewhat disingenuous. Then I go on to say, in Tokoroa, the operator of the Tokoroa Airfield, NZTO, is the South Waikato District Council, who have agreed to allow the operation of RPAS by Model Flying New Zealand wings holders at the airfield itself. In fact, this is even noted in the AIP for NZTO, see Note 3 on the aerodrome operational data page for NZTO. Let's have a look at that so you can see. Remember, the AIP is a document that CAA themselves publish. Here's Tokoroa Aerodrome, as you can see. Note 3 says, broadcast joining intentions at 5 nautical miles as model aircraft flying may take place during daylight hours. So if CAA had just bothered to look at their own documentation, they would see that there is clearly an arrangement with the airfield operator for operations at the Tokoroa Airfield. Yeah, there you go. And also, Tokoroa, let me just go and find it here. We've got in the drone policy. The council also has a drone policy, and So they also give permission because they say that, if we go down here, permit-free operations, this is drone operations, may occur by those who have a pilot's license or have been granted their wings badge through Model Flying New Zealand or directly supervised by a person with wings or in a shielded operation in the following locations. Lake Moana Nui. So the operator of the Tokoroa airfield has an arrangement to allow the flying of drones or models at Lake Moana Nui and at their airfield. Now, these are things that the CAA investigator could have found out for himself. I'm surprised he didn't. Why is he asking me? This is public information, easily found out. Investigators, I thought you're supposed to investigate. But he's obviously not investigating, just asking me for the information. That's fine, I'm giving it to him with references, links, attachments, all the things he needs to verify what I'm saying. Now, of course, there is the hospital helipad, which is also close to the flying areas, within 4K of the airport and within 4K of the lake. So, as I've said here though, any flying undertake at or within 4 kilometres of NZTO is therefore covered by that arrangement with the South Waikato District Council as the airfield operator as required under the regulations. So, obviously that's not a breach. That's not a breach. And then likewise, flying by the club of which I'm a member, the Forest Flyers at NZTO, and at the park at Lake Moana Nui, which are both within 4 kilometres of the hospital helipad, is covered by an arrangement made with the helipad management through one Sean Carlton of the DHB back in October 2016. So I also have an arrangement with the helipad. So I have completely complied with my requirements under the regulations to have the necessary certification and to have arrangements with the operators of both airfields. So there we go. Any concerns as to whether I breached 205 must be completely alleviated here. That's assuming, and I use the word assuming, that I was actually flying the models at the time, which I'm neither confirming nor denying. Okay, so that addresses those complaints which were raised both in the flight with the magpies at the airfield and the, what was the other one? The lake bed flight. Okay, those complaints there, that was raised in both of them. So let's look at issue number 2. Was subsection 209 breached? And remember, 209 is the line of sight and the FPV spotter rule. And here's my response. Whenever my flights are conducted wearing FPV goggles, an observer, as required under the regulations, is always present when necessary to ensure the safety of the operation. Often this observer is my wife, who does so on condition that she does not actually appear in the video footage created. My wife's a very shy woman. She's happy to help me out by spotting, but she says she does not want to appear in the videos, and I respect her request, and I often edit out footage where she may appear, or she positions herself in such a way that she cannot be readily seen in the footage. That's fine. There is nothing that says spotters must appear in FPV footage in the regulations. And an interesting point of view here too, that we're told that the reason we need a spotter for FPV flying is because of the cameras we use. The technology isn't capable of seeing something as large as, for example, a twin-engined helicopter against a blue sky, or a Cessna 172, or any other kind of manned aircraft, large as they may be. The camera's not good enough to see these large objects against a plain background. We cannot see them apparently, so we need a spotter. So one would obviously expect from that a camera which cannot see something as large as a huge twin-engined rescue helicopter couldn't see a small elderly woman standing in the bushes. So the fact that you may not see a spotter in my videos does not mean there wasn't one. There is no evidence to say that there wasn't one. And so if I was flying and it was necessary to preserve safety, there would have been a spotter. That's what I have to say about that. But I go on a bit because I'm as I say, I'm a safety-centric guy. I'm not a rule-centric guy, I'm safety-centric. I go on to say I'm very much aware of the objective of Part 209 and the importance of situational awareness. To this end, I always exceed the requirements of the regulation by also carrying a radio tune to the local aircraft operating frequency, 123.25 MHz, whenever I am flying either by line of sight or via FPV. It should be noted that almost without exception, manned aircraft, especially helicopters operating at low levels, can actually be heard long before they can be seen with the naked eye, especially the BK117 that lands at NZJX, the hospital helipad. I find it interesting that a hearing test is not required for either the pilot or spotter observer when flying RPAS near or at airfields. But then again, perhaps I'm just overcautious when it comes to matters of safety and do not rely solely on rules to ensure such safety. Note that this addresses the concerns in the Magpie flights at NZTO as well. So there we go. And in respect to the fog flight, your reference in your email, given that, referenced in your email, given that my drones do not have GPS or autonomous capabilities such as return to home, it is clearly obvious that visual contact must have been maintained throughout the flight with that lightweight sub 250 gram craft, bright LEDs visible to the spotter, or the craft could not have been navigated back to its point of origin. Clearly this was not a breach of subsection 209, as I suspect has been alleged, or the craft could not have been flown back to its landing point. That's pretty conclusive evidence that even if I was flying it, it was never out of line of sight, or it would never have come back. I think it would be hard to argue that point. So that puts that to bed, the issue of compliance with part 209. Now let's have a look at 207. 207 was the airspace one. And my response is the entire flight, which is the fog flight, was conducted solely over my own property and Lake Moananui, which backs onto my property. The South Waikato District Council has given express permission for drone flying to be conducted over Lake Moananui. I showed you that in their drone policy, and the surrounding park in the policy accompanying its public places bylaw. See section 4.4 in the copy attached. That was the piece I showed you. Hence, this flight was also compliant with subsection 207. So I think there were 3 regulations they thought that I may have breached. I think I've adequately addressed that if I was flying the drone, or the drones in question, then there were no regulatory breaches, because I have explained in every situation why there wouldn't be. But I want to go on, one thing also that CAA need to be very aware of, and I think they are aware of, because there's all this allegation, you know, and if it was you, and because they can't prove from the video who it was. And I've added, you may also want to consider that when you see my YouTube videos, or what you see in my YouTube videos is not always exactly what happens. I spend quite a bit of time with video effects software creating content that is designed to entertain as well as inform. Look at the first few seconds of this video, for example. And do you really think a jet flew over my hangar at NZTO? No. As realistic as that might appear, it was computer-generated visual effects of the type I often or sometimes use in my videos. Video evidence is therefore inherently unreliable, and at least in my case, is not a good framework on which to make assumptions or draw conclusions. So I think it would be very hard to draw the conclusion that I had breached any regulation. It's certainly impossible to draw the conclusion that I had done anything unsafe. As I say, I've been flying models for over 60 years, and I have an impeccable record, never injuring any third party, never damaging any third party property. That is a record I think that very few within the CAA could match. I don't think many of them even fly model aircraft or drones, and some of the questions obviously clearly point to that. But I think, yeah, if they were to go ahead with decide, well, we don't believe you, and this response is not adequate, and we're going to take you to court, I'll go to court. I'd love to go to court and put this before a judge, because the whole issue of whether the rules are fit for purpose in New Zealand needs to be drawn into question, and this is something that a judge can challenge. Will I get a prosecution notice? I might just get a fine in the mail, in which case I'll take it to court. If they want to take me to court, we'll drag it through the courts, and I will certainly be asking, why are you chasing this old man with his toy grey drones when you should be investigating the things that are costing lives every day, or not every day, but certainly every year, costing the lives of manned aviators? Why are you doing that? And why are my complaints ignored? Why have I seen no action again in the complaint I've laid? And why was someone in the South Island of New Zealand able to shoot down a drone with a shotgun and not face any charges? When the Civil Aviation Act says that's an offence, it's not just regulation, it's an act of Parliament. And that offence was completely ignored by CAA. They chose not to lay charges. Why not? I don't understand. Surely bringing down an aircraft, manned or not, with a shotgun is a pretty serious offence. Certainly a lot more serious than allegations that some old guy may have been flying his little toy drones in a muddy lake bed somewhere. Seriously. So there you go. That's my response to CAA. I may tidy it up a little bit before I finally send it, but that's how I'm approaching this. As Christopher said, I don't have to answer any questions. I'm choosing not to answer some of the questions, but I am putting information to him which will enable him to see that even if it was me flying those drones, no breaches of the regulations occurred, and that this becoming constant annoyance of CAA coming and complaining to me that there's been complaints about my videos needs to stop. Someone is weaponizing the complaints process to annoy me, and it's not good enough. It's not good enough. There are much better things for CAA and me to be spending our time doing. So I expect this to be the last complaint I get from CAA, the last time they come to me and say, oh, someone's complained. They need to do what they've done to me when I complained and say, thank you, and then just do nothing. That's what they should do. Anyway, I'd like to hear your comments. Go to the commenty bit down here. Tell me what you think. Have I handled this properly? Is this the right way to approach this? How would you have done it? Have you ever been investigated by the aviation regulator in your country? If you were going to be investigated, what would you do? And did you see anything that in any of the videos that have been complained about that represents a risk, a danger? Has in any way property or person been endangered by my flying? I'm pretty sure not, but hey, I'm always open for alternative points of view. There you go. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. I'm sure this isn't over, and I will keep you up to date with what happens as time goes on. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Thanks to my Patreon supporters. You make it all possible. Now I've got work to do. See you later.